Okay, welcome everybody. Today we're going to be talking about business structures for AI entrepreneurs. And as you can see, the question you are probably having is, I need to make sure my business is set up right. And that's why you're here today. So we'll make sure that we talk about that. And this workshop is for you if these statements apply to you. If you can say that, or you have been saying that in the back of your head, you're in the right place. So if you say, I want to keep my personal assets safe from business problems, this is for you. If you say in your head, I don't want my co-founder or partner to screw me later, it's for you. I want to be clear on who owns what in the business, you're in the right place. Or something like, I don't want to mess up taxes or investor stuff later, you're in the right place as well. What you will learn today is the difference between state entity types and federal tax classifications. As an attorney, I see a lot of confusion on this point, so we'll clear that up for you. How to choose the right entity structure for your goals, when and why to elect S Corp, S corporation status. We'll get into that. So much confusion on this point. When a C Corp makes sense for you, and all this comes from the entity and ownership pillar of your legal protection system, the system that we have developed to help AI entrepreneurs feel legally protected in their business. What about me? Who am I? I am attorney Tatyana. I am a first generation immigrant to the United States, so you might hear a little bit of an accent. I was born and raised in the Soviet Union, which is now Russia, but I've been here for quite a while. I went to college here in the United States and I got a bachelor of science degree in computer science in 2002. Then I worked as a software developer for a Fortune 500 company. If any of you guys have ever heard of Novell, back in the day, they were huge. I worked for them. Then I decided to go to law school. I got my law degree, the JD, and graduated from my law school in the top 10% of my class in 2006. I've been an attorney since then, and it's crazy, crazy for me that it's been almost 20 years next year. I am a member of the Utah State Bar and Idaho State Bar, so I am a licensed attorney in those two states in the United States. And I am an active practicing attorney. In 2023, I founded Summit Legacy Law, which is your traditional law practice. And when you think of an attorney, that is probably what you think of. You hire an attorney to do custom legal work for you one-on-one. That's what Summit Legacy Law does. But on top of that, I want to reach more people, help more AI entrepreneurs, and find ways to do it in a little bit non-traditional way. So these educational workshops are one of the ways. You can find these on YouTube, or you can find these in my school community, and I encourage you and welcome you to join me on those channels as well as Instagram at Attorney Tatyana. Okay, let's dig in. I mentioned this legal protection system, and I wanted to create really a system, a framework for AI entrepreneurs in particular, but all business owners can fall under this, that allows you to visualize. I'm very visual, so it really helps me to kind of see it visually, and to understand with regard to your business, well, what are you doing? What is legal for your business? What does it mean? Because we come to different law firms' websites and they have all of these practice areas, and it's kind of like, okay, whatever, it's overwhelmed. We just don't know where to grab onto. It's just, it's just a big mess in reality. And so this legal protection system is a condensed version of that. As you can see, your business is in the middle, and there are 6 pillars or 6 wedges that are part of this legal protection system. And you can see that in the top, on top of it, we have a legal audit. And we kind of have to know. We have to know where are we now before we can get somewhere else. So legal audit is just the place where we start. And it's something that is cyclical. As you get your legal audit, you fix the issues, you grow, then you reevaluate again. And it's an ongoing process. So it just keeps on going. Aside from the legal audit, we really try to look at your business holistically, and we worry about the 5 big areas, as you can see: entity and ownership, compliance and data, revenue monetizations, team and operations, and your intellectual property. And so you will always know, where are we in this system? What are we talking about? Where does it fit in? So you have the big picture in mind at all times, and then the small details fall into that big picture. I find myself that is the best way for me to understand anything, really, to get the big picture and then to understand the small details and where they fit in. And today, obviously, we're talking about entity and ownership, so we're going to focus on that pillar in particular, in that wedge. So this pillar covers choosing your state level legal entity, understanding your federal tax classification, setting up ownership. What are you doing about founders, equity, vesting, preparing for outside capital, and avoiding things like legal debt that can derail your funding or exit. So let's start digging in. State level entity types. Most of businesses really start out as some kind of side hustles or side gigs, right? We've heard all the stories about starting a business in your garage, and you're just doing it maybe as a hobby. Maybe you have the intent to do this as a business, but you just start, right? Best thing is just start. Make something and try to make money. And I think most of you watching this are probably at this stage. You made some kind of AI tool, AI product, a chatbot, a voice agent. You found somebody who would buy it and pay you, and you're making 5 figures a month, probably comfortably at this point, but you just did it quickly. You just wanted to start, get some money flowing in, and you didn't really worry too much about legal. And that is totally normal. But now, maybe you filed something with the state, right? But now I want you to really understand what we're doing here. So people get confused with the state level entity types and the federal taxation. And I want to make sure we separate these as we talk about them. So right now we're talking about your state level entity type, and we're talking specifically about the United States. I know that some of our AI entrepreneurs are international, but if you have US clients, you have to organize in one of the 50 states. And obviously, if you're a United States entrepreneur, you have to organize in one of the 50 states. And most likely you would organize in the state where you're doing business, where you live would be the state that you would look to form your entity. And that is really the best choice for most entrepreneurs, especially if you don't intend to get any VC funding, if you just want to grow your business and keep it as a private business. And we'll touch on that a little bit later too. So you're looking at your state level entity type. And most of the 50 states in the United States, they offer these entity types for you. You can be a sole proprietorship, which is automatic if you do nothing. If you don't file anything with the state, if you're just operating your business from your name, you're a sole proprietorship. And that is the high risk because there's no protection from liability. If you mess up for a client, you build them a chat bot that loses them 100,000 worth of sales, they can come after you personally for liability for that big loss, and they can get your house, they can get your car, whatever other assets you have. So sole proprietorship is the highest risk. And if you are still a sole proprietor, then you really need to think about doing something about it. Most of entrepreneurs have heard about just filing something with a state and have probably gone and filed something with a state. But another option at a state level is a partnership. And a partnership, if you have obviously more than one person, and there are different types of partnerships, they're less common. It's unlikely that you register your entity as a partnership, but it's there. You share personal liability unless it's formalized into some kind of limited liability partnership. The most popular by far is the LLC, a limited liability company, and then the corporation. Corporations actually came first in the law. And corporation, I'll start with the corporation as well. So corporation provides liability protection for the owners. And a corporation can have one owner, which is called shareholder, can have multiple owners or shareholders. Provides protection from liability. We'll touch on that in a further slide a little bit more in depth. And it's very, very formal. You actually have to file bylaws. Again, if you just file something through an online service, they probably didn't bother with bylaws for you. You probably just filed your articles and that's all you have, which is not enough. And corporations, we'll talk about taxation. In general, they go through this double level of taxation, and that is a big disadvantage. They provide liability protection, which is great, but the double level of taxation is not that fun. And the double level of taxation means your corporation, it makes profit, it pays income tax to the government on that profit, then it distributes it to you as a dividend. When you receive the dividend, you have to pay income tax to the government on the dividend you receive. So that's the second level of taxation. Because of that disadvantage, this LLC was created, and every state, as far as I know, in the United States offers LLC as a state level entity. And what you get with an LLC is the liability protection, which is what you want. You want to, any of your business, boo-boos, debts, judgments to stay contained within the business and not come after your personal assets. So you want that liability protection. With the LLC, you can have one owner, you can have multiple owners. In an LLC, they're usually called members, and your ownership is called interest, membership interest. So LLC provides this liability protection, and it is, depending on how it's taxed, it can avoid the two levels of taxation because the LLC would not be taxed at the entity level. All the income would pass through to you as the owner, and then you only pay once on that income tax on your personal tax return. So, but on the state level, these are usually your options. You can stay a sole proprietorship if you do nothing. It can be a partnership, which is pretty rare. Your choices are really LLC or a corporation. And again, the difference between LLC and corporation depends on what do you want to do? If you want to have an exit, if you want to have VCs investing in you and have an exit like a public offering, or you intend to just grow tremendously, you would probably want a corporation and you would do a Delaware C-Corp. We'll get into it more. If you want to grow your private business, maybe you're going to fund the business from bank loans, maybe you're going to have a few strategic investors, then LLC is probably a better way to go. So this is liability protection, what it actually means. There's more to it, but there are three big areas. It's a personal asset shield. And we're going to focus on LLCs, but again, corporations give you this protection as well. If your LLC or a corporation is properly formed and operated, then you receive liability protection. So again, any losses are contained within the business. They will not come after your personal assets. So you want that. There are some issues with piercing the veil. And so we say like this, that the wall of protection between your business and your personal assets is called corporate veil. Again, corporations were here first, so we call it corporate veil, even though it applies to the LLCs as well. And if something were to happen to you and you got sued, whoever's suing your business, they will try to pierce this corporate veil so they can come after your personal assets. And we don't want that. We don't want to pierce the veil. We don't want that wall to crumble. And that can happen if you're commingling funds, if you're commingling your business purchases and your personal purchases. You maybe don't even have a business account. You're using the same credit card for your business and personal. So you're commingling. If you skip formalities, like having an operating agreement, having bylaws, if you don't have proper documents for your entity, then whoever's suing you would say, look, that business owner doesn't even act like this is a real entity. They have no documents. Why should the court respect it? We want to go after their personal assets. So this protection, this liability protection, depends on how you run your business, not just what you file once with the state to form it. It's how you run it day to day consistently. And then contractual and statutory liability protection. Whenever you prepare agreements, you always want to discuss liability and who's liable for what and how that works. But you also want that, take advantage of that from the state law. Again, the state law gives you this liability protection if you form an LLC or a corporation, but you have to maintain that. Okay, next, federal income tax classifications. So this is where I see so many newer business owners and even mature business owners, people who have been in business for a while, just confused talking about these things. One of the most important things to understand, think of it as a train track with two rails that don't cross. You have your state entity and you have your federal taxation. The IRS is your federal taxation. IRS does not see your LLC. IRS doesn't know what an LLC is. LLC is not a taxation type. So for taxation type, you have disregarded entities. Otherwise, they're known as pass-through entities. They're basically disregarded by the IRS. You don't need to file a separate tax return for these business entities. All of the profit and loss, they pass through to your individual income tax return. So they're disregarded entities. You have partnerships, where you basically have two or more people who are pass-through entities of some sort. And then a lot of the single member LLCs would be taxed as a disregarded entity. As a single member LLC, you're the only owner, 100% owner. If your entity, if your LLC makes profit or has a loss, that is passed through to your individual tax return. If you have a multi-member LLC, then you can be taxed as a partnership. And that means then you have two or more people, sometimes they're entities, that if there is income or profit or loss in your LLC and you have multi-member, it's a partnership, that profit or loss passes to those individual partners to put on their income tax return. personal return. Then there is the corporation, and corporation taxation, like I mentioned, is a double taxation. A corporation would file its own tax return. And if there's a profit, the corporation would have to pay their income tax, the corporate tax rate, which is different from individual rate. And then if there's anything left and the corporation makes distribution to shareholders, then the shareholders would have to show that as a dividend on their individual tax return and pay tax again on the money that's already been taxed. So that's the disadvantage of corporations. Because of that, there was legislation federally that created this S corporation type for taxation, which there are some requirements for this S corporation, and can be a corporation at the state level, or it can be an LLC at the state level that makes the election to be taxed as an S corp. So this is where the confusion often happens. Again, because for taxation purposes, there's no LLC. You either tax as a disregarded entity, as a partnership, or an S corp. And to be qualified as an S corp, you have to have 100 or less shareholders. So again, if you're looking for public listing type of exit, that's not for you. You're going to have more than 100 shareholders. For an S corporation, you also need your shareholders to be US only. They have to be US, I think citizens, maybe residents would be okay. I would have to double check on that. But we have some international founders watching, so that might not be an option for you. And with the S corporation, you basically get a treatment as a disregarded entity. If you're taxed as an S corporation, you don't have to file a return for the entity. It passes through to the owner's tax returns. And a lot of the LLCs start as single member or multi-member, but taxed as disregarded entity or a partnership for payroll tax reasons. And then usually when you hit 50,000 or more in profit in your entity, you would want to file an S Corp election for your LLC. And I believe there's another slide for that to touch more on that, but that is completely another topic for another day. We can have another workshop on just S election. So we're going to keep on going here. And let's talk about equity. Equity is important for founders, especially for AI entrepreneurs. I often see or have potential clients, that is a non-technical founder looking for a technical founder or vice versa. And so we start getting into this equity. And what is equity? That term gets thrown around. Equity is ownership in your company. And there are different forms. I already mentioned that if you have an LLC, then the equity or ownership of the LLC is called membership interest. If you have a corporation, then it's stock. Stock is what evidence of your ownership. There are other ways to have equity, like phantom equity, which is a contractual obligation, usually on exit, to share equity with somebody. You can have revenue or profit share, which is not true equity, but I hear AI entrepreneurs and other business owners throw the term equity around. You really need to understand what equity is. It's ownership in your company. And if you have developers and if you promise them equity, you have to be very careful to really understand, what are you promising them? Are you promising them true ownership in your company? Are you promising them phantom equity, which is some kind of share upon exit? Or are you just talking about revenue share or profit share, which is not really true equity? So words matter, and you have to be careful using this word equity and throwing it around. Know what it means and use it appropriately. Here's some common equity setups for AI founders and entrepreneurs. Often this conversation comes up, again, because you're trying to incentivize people who are helping you out in the business early on. Maybe you don't have a lot of money to pay them, especially pay them up front, but you want them to work for you. So if you are a non-technical founder and you need developers, that's where I see the most. So one option is to offer phantom equity. You promise your developers, maybe you can pay them whatever you can right now, and maybe it's below market rate or like barely on the lower end of market rate, but you promise them a percent of whatever you get in an exit in your company, and that would be their share upon the sale of your company. And you can promise them 1%, 2%, something, a fractional share. But that would, again, happen upon the exit for your company if you're selling it or merging it. So phantom equity, it's not true equity. They're not going to get immediate ownership in your company. They're not going to get any type of control or voting in your company. If your company has an exit, they would get a share of that. And that incentivizes them to really work for you and have good product. Another option to incentivize somebody is vesting. And it's pretty standard. You want, for example, you're a non-technical founder, you want to bring a technical founder, you want to incentivize them to come in. You promise them a 10% share in your company, for example, and you would have a 4-year standard vesting with a like 1-year cliff. So it would mean that they have to be a year with you before you would give them a quarter of whatever you promised. So it would be 2.5% of 10%. And then you can vest it every month. So that is one option to incentivize somebody, but not give them immediate ownership in your company. You just kind of do it slowly, gradually, so they get more skin in the game. Sometimes you want advisors. You want somebody who's done it and did so well, and you want their advice. You can't pay them. You want to give them something for being your advisor. You can offer them advisor equity. Usually that's pretty small. And another option is revenue sharing. And this works great if, again, if you have developers to promise them some revenue sharing, and it usually is a percentage of gross or profit, and it's usually capped. So, for example, you can promise 2 to 10% of gross revenue or net profit. Gross is easier to figure out. Net, you can start nitpicking, was something an expense or valid or not valid, but you can give somebody a 2% of gross revenue until it's 100,000 or 5% of profit capped at 50,000. Again, so it's not astronomical. It's not going to, in the end, kind of hurt you, but cap it. And then there are equity buybacks. If something happens to this partner of yours, co-founder, if they leave, you want the equity back. So you want to have provisions that allow you to get your equity back, your ownership. So here is a quick slide on when to form a Delaware C-Corp. So a C-Corp, C is for taxation. Corporation, again, we talked about corporation is a state law creature, provides limited liability. C is the part of how it's taxed, and C just means it's subject to this double taxation. It is disadvantageous for a lot of private business owners. Why would you have a C Corp? Well, you want a C Corp, like I mentioned, if you want to raise funds from VCs, they pretty much will require that you have a C Corp. And most likely they would want to see a Delaware C-Corp. So if you're going that route, if you're thinking about that, you really either initially should file a Delaware C-Corp or you should convert to a Delaware C-Corp if you're going, again, into the VC funding. If you think you want to keep your company private, you might get some bank lending, some strategic investors, then staying as an LLC, taxed as an S-Corp would be great. If you want to offer stock options, if you need a qualified small business stock tax benefits. So these are kind of topics for another day. Or if you plan a high value exit, if you think you'll be listed on New York Stock Exchange, or if you want to be acquired, if you're looking to be a unicorn. So for most of our AI entrepreneurs, I know you guys are building personal businesses and you might be planning on an exit, but if you're not really going VC route, you should be fine sticking with an LLC and not a Delaware C-Corp. You don't really want to go that route unless necessary because you don't want to get into this double taxation situation. And of course, there is a stricter governance, but it is also high legitimacy. So again, for VC. Funding and structure consideration. For AI entrepreneurs that are not raising VC rounds, for your funding, bank loans are great, but when you go to the bank, they want to see that your documents are done, not that just you file your articles. They will want to see your operating agreement for your LLC. They want to know what your organizational structure is, if you have officers, if you have employees, team members. Another way to fund your AI startup is strategic investors, and strategic investors will want equity and they will want to know what the roles are, but they will want to see your operating agreement. They won't want to know what are we signing up for as far as ownership. Contractors, we already talked about phantom equity or revenue sharing, or you can have some kind of bonus performance plans to be able to fund your entity that way, promise your contractors something bigger on the other end so they're willing to work for you kind of harder for less maybe on the front end. And then you can look for partners. If you get really good IP, you can start licensing that IP, get revenue that way, or some kind of joint ventures. Your structure, your business structure really provides protection and credibility for you. And with that, I don't have it in the slides, but with that, please get a business email. It's not, doesn't look that great if you have something at gmail.com. If you're running a serious business, get a serious email address. That's all I'm going to say on that. Some bonus tips for structuring smart. Use an operating agreement if you're an LLC or bylaws if you formed a corporation. The operating agreement really talks about the ownership a lot of your company, what happens if you add owners, what happens if owners leave. So have that document in place. Vest your founder equity from day one. So you'll be the first founder, most likely. Maybe you'll have a co-founder, but know who owns what and vest that equity. Have record of that. If you're 100% owner of the company, have it written somewhere. If you have 50-50, have it written somewhere. So in the future, the questions, you don't have to scramble to come up with those answers. Keep a cap table even for LLCs. Even if you're a single member LLC, create an attachment to your operating agreement where you say you own 100% of the membership interest. It's as easy as that. It's just great practice. And plan your exit now. You're building this business, and I know a lot of us, like AI is so hot, so many people are getting into it without really any plan. But think about it. What are you going to do with this business? Like, you're going to keep growing it and scaling it, and then what? You hope you will sell it. Do you hope that you'll pass it on to your kids? Do you think you'll just walk away from it and let it disintegrate? What is your exit plan? And if you plan for nothing, it's going to be walk away and it's going to disintegrate. So if you don't plan for it, it's just that's what happens. And I see it all the time, not with AI businesses so much, but with other types of kind of family businesses, lifestyle businesses. When the founder is done, the business collapses and everything they've built up, it just disappears because there was never a plan on selling it or passing it on. So think about that. And with that said, this was an overview of your business structures for your AI business. And for those of you who are here, I'm going to stop recording, but we're going to keep our Q&A time going. Thank you so much for everybody who have participated, and join us again for these workshops. They're going to be monthly from our school community, Legal Launchpad for AI Entrepreneurs. You can also find me, like I said, on Instagram at Attorney Tatyana, as well as on YouTube at Attorney Tatyana, where I will be sharing more useful content like this.